Hello and welcome to Other Voices, brought to you by Peninsula Peace and Justice Center. I'm your host, Paul George. On November 8th, when Californians go to the polls to cast their votes, they will be setting a new record. Not for turnout, not for number of votes cast, but for number of ballot measures on our ballot. There are 17 of them this year, and it is a record. And on this month's Other Voices, we're going to try to work our way through at least some of those ballot measures and try to get a handle on them a little bit better. I have three folks here in the studio with me, and I'm going to start at the far end of the table introducing them. I'll just go around quickly. Eitan Fenson is active with Move to Amend, and he's here to help us understand what Proposition 59 is all about, promising to overturn Citizens United. Eitan, welcome back to Other Voices.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Next over, here to talk about Proposition 62 to end the death penalty, we have Gerard McGuire. Gerard works with California People of Faith working to end the death penalty. And that's a record-breaking title for an organization. Gerard, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Glad to have you here. And last but not least, to talk about Proposition 63, a new gun safety measure on the ballot, is Don Veith of the Brady campaign to reduce gun violence. And you're not officially representing the Brady campaign, but that's where you do your activism, right, Dan?
That's a lot of it, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And you're, first of all, welcome to Other Voices.
Thank you very much.
Another first-time guest. Glad to have you both here. Let me explain to our viewers at home and our audience here, the reason I invited these three to talk about these three particular measures out of the 17 is that these are the three measures that most closely fit with the issues that the Peace and Justice Center have been working on for a long time, the Citizens United and trying to end the death penalty. I've been at the Peace and Justice Center for 25 years, and we've been working on it since then and before, and gun safety and reducing gun violence. So the hope is that when we get to the Q&A, the audience, maybe some of you in the audience, know about some of the other propositions and can just share your opinions. You've got a favorite one that you want to promote, that's good enough. Or if you have questions, I've been doing homework on ones that I guess people might ask questions about. If I've guessed wrong, you're going to get a blank stare back, or I'll look it up online as we go. Okay, so those are the ground rules. That's what we're going to try to get through in the next hour. And let's just go in alphabetic order. Proposition 59 is to overturn Citizens United. How are you going to do that with the California ballot measure? It's a Supreme Court decision.
Well,
what's this about?
Prop 59 is what's called a voter instruction. Article 1 of the California State Constitution allows for the people, the voters, to instruct their representatives to do something. It's non-binding, but it is an expression of the will of the voters. So you're right. It will not overturn Citizens United. However, because California is the largest and hopefully the most influential state of the union, a rather resounding vote in favor of Prop 59 will send a resounding message to the rest of the country. There have already been a number of votes taken in other states, also voter instruction measures, one in a red state in Montana.
And these were statewide ballot
Statewide
measures?
ballot measure in Montana and Colorado in 2012, each of which was a 75 to 25% margin. They both won resoundingly, but a message from California will swamp that message. There have been numerous other votes, both in terms of um, resolutions on the part of local city councils and other municipal agencies. There's a lot of sentiment to A, overturn Citizens United, but B, do something a lot more substantive. And that is to get rid of the double whammy that we have right now that silences the voices. This is other voices, our voices.
Yeah.
Big money silences our voices in a couple of ways. In particular, very wealthy people and organizations get to express their quote-unquote free speech by spending money. That is the result of a Supreme Court decision in 1976 called Buckley versus Vallejo that equates the spending of money with the exercise of free speech. So Prop 59 is a voter instruction that says to our representatives, we have to get rid of that. We need to instruct the Supreme Court that no, indeed, the spending of money in political context is not an expression of free speech. I say double whammy because there's another element of this, and that is the wealthy and powerful use corporations, unaccountable corporations, to influence public policy and elections in ways that are somewhat hidden. Those ways are justified by a principle that was first affirmed by the Supreme Court in 1886, saying that corporations have the same rights as human beings under the Constitution. It was initially applied to the 14th Amendment, that corporations can exercise their equal protection rights under the law. And it turns out that everything that I learned in elementary school about civics and the 14th Amendment, that it was passed to correct some of the deficiencies in the 13th Amendment, freeing the slaves, to allow freed slaves to exercise their rights. Indeed, since the 14th Amendment was passed, the Supreme Court has ruled on 14th Amendment rights by a 10-to-1 margin in favor of corporations rather than human beings.
Yeah.
So our voices are being silenced. They're being silenced by corporations exercising their constitutional rights to equal protection, to free speech, to takings under the Fifth Amendment, to freedom from search and seizure, and the very wealthy are exercising their free speech rights by spending gobs of money on campaigns. Citizens United made the whole thing worse. It combined the two. It said, okay, not only can human beings, not only can wealthy human beings put their thumb on the scales of elections, but now corporations can do the same thing, but not only put their thumb on the scales, they can spend unlimited amounts of money to influence the outcomes of elections. Polls have shown that Republicans, by margins exceeding 70%, believe that Citizens United needs to be overturned, which is one of the reasons that we believe that this voter instruction will have a resounding message and will in fact buck the tide of some of the Tea Party rhetoric. It turns out that the Tea Party is very much, shall we say, consistent with the getting rid of Citizens United, and we're looking forward to a resounding victory.
All right. What specifically is the instruction that we're giving our, this is going to our congressional representatives and senators?
Let me read you the text of the initiative.
Sure.
Shall California's elected officials use all their constitutional authority, including but not limited to, proposing and ratifying an amendment or amendments to the United States Constitution to overturn Citizens United v. Federal Election Commission 2010 and other applicable judicial precedents to allow the full regulation or limitation of campaign contributions and spending, to ensure that all citizens, regardless of wealth, may express their views to one another, and make clear that corporations should not have the same constitutional rights as human beings. That is Prop 59.
Okay. So to say it will overturn Citizens United, it's kind of too narrow a focus. It's really geared at all these Supreme Court decisions that you just
Indeed
so well
it is.
went through and gave us a quick history of.
Indeed it is.
While we're talking about money in politics, whose money is behind Prop 59?
You know, it's an interesting question.
I'll bet a billionaire didn't put this on the...
That's a good bet. It turns out there isn't a lot of money behind Prop 59. I can tell you organizationally who's behind it and how it is being supported. There was a group of activists in Southern California in 2013 that petitioned their local representative, at the time Ted Lieu, a state senator, to propose a bill in the legislature to put a measure on the ballot, essentially like Prop 59. That measure passed the legislature. It was put on the ballot, and a suit was filed by the Jarvis taxpayers, taking it off the ballot. Since then, the court has affirmed that, yes, indeed, we do have the right to have that on the ballot, and it is on this ballot this year instead of 2014. There are 4 organizations that are behind this financially: Common Cause, CalPIRG, California Clean Money Campaign, and Free Speech for People. Those 4 organizations are using their resources to campaign for Prop 59. MOVI, Money Out, Voters In, the group of activists that push this for the legislature, has formed a political action committee called End Citizens United Yes on 59. The URL is yesonca59.com. And that is the entity that is promoting the initiative, backed financially by those 4 groups, and
all grassroots organizations.
All grassroots organizations, and Move to Amend. Move to Amend is not one of the 4 sponsors, but we are in fact part of a larger coalition campaigning for Prop 59. And I can tell you, the Santa Clara County affiliate of Move to Amend is focused solely on passing Prop 59 this time. We've worked in concert with the Prop 59 campaign. We have materials that we have distributed, that we have produced in behalf of Prop 59, and we believe very strongly in the cause. So there is a lot of grassroots support for this without a whole lot of money.
Is anyone spending money against it, and who is?
Nobody has really spent money against it yet. We anticipate that there will be some opposition coming forward. There is one group that has come out publicly opposed to Prop 59, and unfortunately that's the League of Women Voters. Their argument is essentially that it's too hard to pass an amendment, and after all, this amendment is probably not going to be worded very well anyway, so let's try to do it some other way. It's ironic because as I read you the text of the initiative, the last sentence initially was different. And the League of Women Voters threatened to oppose the passage within the legislature unless that wording was changed. And it was changed as a result of the opposition by the League of Women Voters. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for them to actually endorse the initiative. So the initial wording was, corporations should not have rights, the constitutional rights of human beings. And the League of Women Voters is a little nervous about eliminating constitutional rights, all constitutional rights for corporations. Unfortunately, that's not an uncommon position. And I would say that that is our biggest challenge in engaging more progressive legislators to get on board. They are concerned that with 140 years of jurisprudence, where the Supreme Court has affirmed that corporations do have constitutional rights, that there will be unanticipated consequences. Our position is, so you like the current situation the way it is, huh? The answer is that corporations were established, are established by state law in 50 states. The Constitution says zip about corporations, and the founders did that on purpose. So the notion that corporations should have constitutional rights and be consistent with the framers of the Constitution doesn't pass muster.
In any event, that language is not part of the soup of 59.
59 has a little change, which is corporations should not have the same constitutional rights as human beings. That seemed to get the League to back off a little bit, but it didn't get them to back off enough.
Well, it got them to back off enough that you got it through the legislature.
Correct.
Onto the ballot.
Correct.
So I'm going to need to start moving along,
Okay.
but what kind of help do you need to get this passed?
Number one, we need you to tell all your friends to vote for Prop 59. This has to be a viral campaign. We are in social media, we're on the web. The Yes on 59 campaign is yesonca59.com. The move to amend Yes on 59 is mta.yeson59.org. Go to those websites. There are pointers about what one can do. Get yard signs from, right now, the Democratic Volunteer Center in Mountain View has yard signs for Prop 59. I invite any of our watchers, listeners, to come and pick some up and put them on their lawns.
All right. Eitan Fenson with Move to Amend, Santa Clara County chapter, and you're actually working for the 59 campaign.
I am. Right? I'm one of the regional coordinators for the Prop 59 campaign as well.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. You got a lot of information conveyed in your 10 minutes here, or 12 that you ended up getting. So, and I hope there's more questions about any of these issues that are raised tonight when we get to the audience Q&A. So moving along numerically, we'll now take our attention over to Proposition 62 to end the death penalty. And once again, Gerard McGuire is with California People of Faith working to end the death penalty. CPF, as you told me to abbreviate it, and I think I will do that from now on. Gerard, welcome once again. And this issue I want to get out at the beginning so we don't forget is really there's two ballot measures addressing the death penalty. But tell us about Prop 62 first, what it will do.
Thank you, Paul, for inviting me. It's great to have an opportunity to explain what we are trying to do with Proposition 62. As some people may remember, 4 years ago, in 2012, we had a Proposition 34, which was similar to this proposition, and that just failed by a margin of 48% to 52%. And that was a wake-up call for those that didn't want to end the death penalty. So they really started working to reinstate, keep the death penalty on and try to work against that proposition. So we mobilized, and we decided that we want to get this back on the ballot and push it over the finish line this time and finally get rid of the death penalty here in California. Currently we have about 750 inmates on death row. And that actually
just California.
In California, yeah, in California. If California overturns the death penalty, they will have eliminated 25% of all death row inmates that are on death row in the Western Hemisphere. So it's a huge, huge thing.
I thought you were going to say the country, but
no. In the Western Hemisphere, because we have the largest population of death row inmates in the U.S. currently. And most countries, all developed countries, have eliminated the death penalty.
Yeah.
I come from Europe, where if you want to be a member of the European community, you have to eliminate the death penalty. And all those 27 countries currently do not have the death penalty. So it was a shock to me when I emigrated here to California and discovered that progressive California had the death penalty.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at, so Proposition 62, let me just kind of briefly outline a couple of main issues that about that.
Yeah.
So Proposition 62 is basically replacing the California failed death penalty system with life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. So that will be the worst punishment that we can give to somebody that commits capital punishment here. It also saves the state of California at least $150 million per year in doing this. It requires inmates.
Why is that? Because it costs so much more to keep somebody on death row than it does?
It does.
Or is it court costs? Or
a combination of both, in fact. If you look at how the justice system works, you have to have two trials. One is to find if the defendant is guilty, and then if you want to seek the death penalty.
Phase, yeah.
And then there's a death penalty phase, which is exactly the same cost. You're retrying the person, going through it again. A typical trial here in California, minimum is probably $1 million. And you know, with,
For a capital case.
for a capital case,
Yeah.
and it can go up to $3 million depending on how complicated it is. If you were to house an inmate on debt or on regular general population, it's probably $60,000 to $65,000 a year. So you already have spent 15 years by trying
Just
this
to
person
convict him, yeah.
before he even gets to serve a day on death row. So also what we're requiring is that the compensation that the inmates will be required to work. Currently, the inmates on death row are not required to work, so that they will be required to work, and part of that money will be the pay restitution to the victims of the crime, which currently isn't there. So it guarantees also that California will never execute an innocent person. And around the nation, there has been over 130 people exonerated from death row. And we speculate that some people, innocent people, have been killed, especially in the state of Texas. And what we want to do is make sure that nobody ever gets executed that's innocent. Last week, it was Innocence Day. And I remember I saw something on TV where they were talking about an inmate from Oklahoma had spent 12 years on death row and then was exonerated from death row.
Yeah.
Some had spent 25 years on death row. So what we want to do is make sure that this abhorrent process ends. And we as a nation need to be aware of the company that we keep. The top countries that execute people are China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, North Korea, and the US.
Yeah.
So we're not in very good company. And so it's time that we left this behind. This is an arcane system of retribution, of revenge, and we need to move on to do it. It also is arbitrarily applied. If you look at people that are on death row right now, it discriminates based on your race, racial profiling, racial economic conditions, as well as geographical conditions. There's 4 counties in the state of California that account for the majority of people that are on death row. So it's the luck of your draw. And of course, depends on the race of the victim as well too.
Right.
And the quality of your defense. And you know, with a lot of these situations where the defense attorneys have limited resources, the defense isn't often adequate. And so often when these appeals go through, and a lot of the time there's a lot of misinformation about appeals. These appeals are mandated by the Constitution. Federal appeals and state appeals are mandated. It's not these prisoners making arbitrary appeals
Trying to
based
be courthouse
just
lawyers.
there's a lot of people that say that these appeals are kind of, you know, just the prisoners just trying to game the system, and that's not the situation at all. The system is a failed system. It's not broken, it's failed, it doesn't work, and we need to move on.
The competing measure on the ballot, Proposition 66, kind of comes from the same thing, that our death penalty system is broken, and they're going to fix it by improving it. Just take 60 seconds to talk about 66 and rebut their arguments, if you would.
Well, you know, the first major thing is they think it's broken. It's failed.
Yes.
It doesn't work. The justice system doesn't work here. And in fact, what they are attempting to do is going to make it actually more complicated. It's going to create greater delays, and it's going to cost more money. So it achieves none of their objectives. And in reality, what they're trying to do is put a proposition on the ballot to confuse people. And if you go to their website says no on 62, yes on 66. So their mandate is really to try to defeat 62, because they know that people have changed. People are now ready to move on and get rid of the death penalty here in California.
Do you have any current polling on how much it has changed? You said the Prop 34, the last attempt, failed by 4 points, 48 to 52.
Well, currently the latest field poll results that came out about 2 weeks ago showed at this stage there was Proposition 62 was leading by 48 to 37%.
With a lot of people still to make.
With 15% still undecided, and that is about that is 11 points ahead of where we were the last time. So we are almost there right now.
Just in general, not about this proposition, but I know the opinions nationally about the death penalty used to be a vast majority of people favored the death penalty, and it gets less and less every time the question is asked. Do you know where that general trend is at this point?
Yeah, I believe it's under 50%. Somebody quoted that number to me the other day.
Under 50.
Under 50. I would say it's probably close around that number, you know, hovering around that role. But the increasing thing is a lot of states now are eliminating the death penalty, but we will be the first that will be able to eliminate it by a proposition process. And this will send a huge message, not only to the US, because that's a Supreme Court situation. And I just share a little story that I was down at a conference a couple of weeks ago. It's called a re-entrance conference, when prisoners come back out into the workforce again. And I met a gentleman there. He was a Japanese man, a defense attorney from Japan, working on death penalty cases. And he turned to me and he said something that really kind of encapsulated what was going on. He said that he is delighted that he can work on this campaign, he said, because I want to be able to tell my children that I was able to work on overturning the death penalty in California, which would eliminate the death penalty in Japan, because Japan still has the death penalty. So he was seeing it from an international perspective, and a huge impact. And that just, because we work on this in the ground, we work in the weeds, and sometimes you don't realize the amazing impact that we'll have. I think we'll have it in California, on the federal system, as well as states. And I think we will eliminate, if it passes here in California, I think within 5 to 10 years, we'll have eliminated that penalty in the US completely. And that's just great news.
That would be good news. And again, quickly, how do people get involved? What kind of help do you need on this campaign, especially locally?
Well, again, if you go to the website, Yes on 62, you will have resources there. You can endorse it. We have lawn signs. If you go online, you'll see where you can pick them up at various places around. We have a place in San Jose, San Francisco, LA, San Diego, and places you can pick it up, lawn signs. Just start talking to people about it. I was at a faith group the other day, and it was interesting. Some of these people said, it's no longer a moral issue. This is a practical issue. This is the time that we need to move on. And I was delighted to hear that, you know, because I come from faith, and I like to use the moral arguments, but they said, no, this is beyond that now. We can go and eliminate this forever, you know.
People can oppose it for whatever reason.
Right, and I'd just like to share some of the people that are supporting it, you know, like the organization, or maybe we can get into that later, you know.
Let's do that quickly, and then we'll move on to 63.
So we do have the League of Women Voters there behind it. We have the California Democratic Party, the Libertarian Party, California Conference of Teachers, the Catholic California Conference. We have the NCAACP, Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund. We have the ACLU. So we have all the usual people that are supporting this, progressive cause.
All right. Gerard McGuire, California People of Faith, working to end the death penalty, and this just might be the year that...
I believe it is.
Thank you,
With
Gerard.
everybody's help.
Yeah, thank you, Gerard. All right, and our final one to take a real close look at is Proposition 63, some gun safety measures back on the ballot. And to help us understand this, Don Veith with the Brady campaign to reduce gun violence. Don, welcome again.
Thank you very much.
So I know Prop 63 is really complex. There's a lot of moving parts in it.
There are 7 basic ideas. Yeah.
So what are the most important ones that people need to know about? They see gun safety on the ballot, and I think a lot of people think gun control, you know?
Well, they do. They do, and they object. And some people object to that.
Yes.
But not everybody. But you're right. Organizations like the Brady campaign avoid using that term, gun control, because it's not. It gets people riled up that don't need to be. They're already riled up, and you don't need to rile them up anymore. The politically correct term is gun violence prevention.
Okay.
And
it's Brady campaign to prevent gun violence.
Yes, exactly.
I wrote it down wrong. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, let me talk about it. Now, unlike these gentlemen, I'm not actually working as part of this campaign.
Okay.
You invited me as somebody
Yes.
who knows, who I studied up on it to do this. And I have some ideas about the different parts of it. But generally, I'm hugely in favor of it. And I'm happy to say that from what I see, 60% of all Californians seem to be in favor of it. And it seems to me that it represents a general understanding in this country that guns cause far more harm than they do good. And more people are coming around to this idea. It's an idea whose time is coming. And I think that America in general is slowly shifting to come to the right side of history on this general issue. But there are 7 mechanisms, as I said, which reduce the risk of gun violence. And one of the most important ones, although it's really a small part of Prop 63, it's the banning of large capacity magazines, which means magazines that hold more than 10 bullets. And one sense in which that's a small part of Prop 63 is that banning was already passed earlier this summer by the California legislature on a separate bill. So the part of it, the Prop 63 is redundant in this area. California has banned the manufacture and sale of these big magazines for a while. And this summer they passed a law banning the possession of them. And Proposition 63, the justification for keeping it as part of 63 is that a vote of the people is stronger than a merely legislative action.
Yeah, it can't be
Can't be as easily weakened or repealed.
by the legislature.
Right.
It would have to go back to the people.
Right. And this ban on large capacity magazines in combination with another law that passed this summer, a bunch of laws passed this summer.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Yeah, which changes rules at the bullet button, which is I won't get into that. It's kind of a complicated thing. Suffice it to say that bullet buttons are a way that the gun industry and gun owners have gamed California's prohibition against semi-automatic weapons. It's a way of saying, no, that's not a semi-automatic weapon because you need a tool to take out the magazine when all you really do is stick a bullet in this little recessed button. And anyway, the combination of banning large capacity magazines and finally, hopefully banning bullet button guns in California is huge. This will bring to fruition California's ban on semi-automatic weapons.
If I understand the problem with automatic and semi-automatic weapons and trying to ban those legislatively, is that the gun manufacturers always find a way to change something mechanically. This is the bullet button that you're talking about. Just enough that they slide out from under the definition and essentially you can't ban them.
Yeah, that goes on. There's already another...
So 63 has language to work around that. No, not really. They'll probably continue to do that. But it addresses one of them. Okay.
Yeah, we'll continue to fight it. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
And I just want to say this about the issue of finally restricting semi-automatic weapons. California is one of the few states that does that or has attempted to do that. And I'll tell you my opinion that mass shootings are not simply facilitated by semi-automatic weapons. I think they are caused by semi-automatic weapons, by which I mean is that the boys that committed the Columbine, Virginia Tech, Tucson, Aurora, Sandy Hook, and Charleston shootings would never have gone beyond starting fires and torturing the neighborhood pets without the feeling and the reality of power that they could get by having a semi-automatic weapon to go and act out their psychoses with.
An excellent point. So a couple other major things. Can we hit them real quick?
Prop 63 will create a new court procedure for confiscating illegally possessed firearms. And for me, this is significant because there are, I think, lots of well-intentioned gun laws which don't work the way they were intended to do simply for logistical reasons. So Prop 63 spells out how courts will now make sure that when somebody gets convicted of a felony, that a combination of extra court paperwork and work by parole officers and law enforcement officers will go and take guns away. And you know that the background check, if somebody comes up with a felony, they can't buy a gun because they're prohibited from owning a gun if you're a felon.
Yeah.
But so often people have guns, commit a felony, and nobody ever bothers to go and get their guns away from them. There's just there hasn't been a mechanism for doing that.
Well,
Prop
that
60
seems like an important thing to address.
It's a very important thing. For some people, the major headline of Prop 63 is that you will now have to pass a background check to buy ammunition, the same way you've had to pass a background check to buy a gun. And belt and suspenders, I say. If you get my meaning. You've had to pass you have to prove that you're not a criminal or criminally insane to own a gun. Well, why not with ammunition too? The two things work together.
The guns don't do much without the ammunition.
This is my last line of my prepared statement. In its last two components, Prop 63 is a long overdue recognition that guns don't kill people except in collaboration with ammunition.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for a quick introduction. I know you were really compressing because there is a lot in there, and maybe there'll be some follow-up questions on this Prop 63. So to all three of you, again, thanks for very good, compressed presentations, and it's time now to turn to our studio audience, and the way this works is hold your hand up and wait till the microphone arrives, and then speak right into the mic so that people who are going to see this on TV can hear it. And if you would, if it's not personally a problem, stand up and make it easier on our camera people. So hold it up close. Hold it up.
I think it's long overdue to get rid of the death penalty, but I am concerned with what appears to be some of the wording here, and I want to know whether it really means what
Keep the mic
it
close.
says.
Thank you.
And that is, it says, Proposition 62 ensures convicted murderers are held accountable and serve a strict life sentence, no chance for parole in the general population. And my understanding is that, as it stands now, there are convicted murderers who don't, who are neither given death sentences nor serve life sentences without the possibility of parole. And that seems to be a step in the wrong direction. Is that really part of this proposition, and is it necessary?
Interesting question.
Yeah, I think that what we're trying to do is that people mistakenly believe that the death penalty is only applied to the worst of the worst offenders, the serial rapists, the mass murderers, all the headline-grabbing executions or murders that go on. That's not really the case, but there are some people that are sentenced to death, and that is the top of the punishment ladder, shall we say. And we're saying only for those, and it's probably not a lot of people, in the number of people that are convicted of murdering. But there has to be certain criteria, and unfortunately that criteria has tended to grow with law enforcement. So it started out very narrow, and then it kind of creeps, like any bureaucratic situation, it kind of creeps to include more people. So we're just saying that group of people, and the people that are currently serving on death row, would be placed into this situation where they would be put into life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. But they will be alive, and there will be still a possibility that they could be found innocent if their appeals go through and things like that. So it's only for that group of people that have gone through that special case situation that now would apply, and they would be executed. Now we require them. Because a lot of people would feel like we have to be realistic. There are good people that are just very fearful of their safety. And they like the idea of killing people because that, in their minds, somebody has done this heinous crime, they need to not serve, not need to breathe anymore. And they don't want them coming out, and there's this kind of idea that sometimes they may get out on parole and kill again. And that's kind of insinuated in some of these other discussions that take place. But this is what we're ensuring is that that will never happen. And currently there's only been 13 executions in the last 30 years. And more people have died on death row, and that's what will happen. These people will die in prison if they meet that narrow band, and hopefully that band will not keep increasing, that it will be starting to be narrowed again. I don't know if that answers your question.
Let me try to follow up a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think you missed part of it. Is it the case under California law now that someone who might face the death penalty could also end up with, say, a 20-year prison term? Is that what you were trying to ask? Because I don't know. It doesn't seem right that...
No, I mean, if somebody is going to be, that doesn't change. So if somebody is going to end up with 20 years imprisonment, then that's what it is. It's not going to change the sentencing guidelines in that. It's only going to really address those people that would have faced the most severe crime punishment, and that is death row. So that would be, so if somebody is found guilty and you want to give them the maximum sentence, right now there are some people that are sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, currently. So there is a gradation of sentences depending on the crime and the conditions and a lot of circumstances. So that's what we were saying. We will just keep that. We will just remove the top end, which says that there will be no longer any executions.
Or people can get sentenced to life and get out on parole at some point after getting a life sentence.
It depends.
Currently.
Not if they're sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole.
Right, under
Well,
Prop
it
62.
exists right now too.
Oh, okay.
So it does exist as a method of punishment right now. So there are those variations right now. So it's not going to say that anybody that's accused would automatically spend the rest of their life imprisonment. It would just mean that those people who are on death row now come down that slot and would fit into that other criteria, which is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. So it's not going to capture a lot more people. It's just going to stop people from being executed. Is that clear? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for a good question. So back to our audience, and again, I want to remind you, if you have a favorite ballot measure on here, feel free to use this time to promote your ballot measure, and we are open to taking questions about other ballot measures, and we'll do our best to try to answer some of those questions anyway.
Gerard, could you talk about what might happen if both Prop 62 and 66 both succeed?
Good question.
Thank you. Because there is two ballot initiatives, and if they both pass, say they both get the 50%, then the one, and this is where Proposition 62 specifically puts a line in there to say that if this will override any other ballot initiative. So you can see where they're already coming from. It will be based on numbers. So whichever proposition gets the most ballot yes votes will be the one that is accepted, assuming that both pass. So if both of them, like if Prop 62 gets over 50%, and also Proposition 66 gets over 50%, then it will be just a number, plain, the largest number of ballots will be the one that gets accepted.
It would be a little odd, though, for California as a state to vote on ending the death penalty and speeding up the application of the death penalty.
Well, yeah, and I don't like to use the word speeding it up because that's language they use because it actually will slow it down. They're actually introducing, and they're putting in mandates. They are requiring, there isn't enough qualified attorneys to represent death row inmates. So they're going to mandate that you're going to have to take death penalty cases even if you're not qualified. And when they're asked, well, wouldn't you get some training? They said, yes, and who's going to pay for that? Well, the legislators will fund that somewhere along the line. So there's a lot of hidden costs in that proposition.
A lot of magic asterisks.
Right, yeah. So the key is the majority of people, and I really feel confident that this time we'll have a majority of people that will just say yes on 62, no on 66.
Okay. Any more? Okay, Crystal down front here.
I have a question about the gun violence initiative, the last part of this handout.
has to do with convicted felons not being able to get guns.
Yeah.
So in light of a lot of states having laws that convicted felons not being able to vote, like even if you were convicted of a felony when you're 19 and now you're 60, you still can't vote in many states. So here you're taking a similar approach, that people are being discriminated against for their whole lives for something they might have done when they were young. Do you think that's fair?
Well, yes, I do. The right to own a gun is not equivalent in my mind at all to the right to own, to the right to vote. And anyway, I think that really the prohibition on owning a gun for a felon is something that just lasts 10 years. Is that right? Are you not? I thought you looked like you were nodding in confirmation. And I hesitate because I'm not positive that's true, but I think some kinds of prohibitions on, like if you steal a gun, I know this for a fact, you're forbidden from owning or buying a gun for just a period of 10 years. So it isn't a lifetime thing.
Not lifetime.
Right.
Okay. Any more questions in the audience? Okay, down front again. You should stop running to the back, Crystal. Just
Well, I guess I'll speak briefly in favor. I don't know the number. There's a proposition that California won't pay more for drugs than the Veterans Administration
61.
pays. 61. And so I'm a physician. I favor that. I think the drugs are way too expensive, and the
Excellent.
pharmaceutical industry really has been extraordinarily greedy and even immoral in their pricing. So, and I don't believe that veterans will end up paying more or that it will have adverse effects. I had a question. I don't remember the number. There was one that I actually came here undecided about, which was there's a school bond measure that that the opponents say is just put on there by the construction industry and won't really benefit the schools. But generally, I vote for school bond measures. So if anybody knows about that, I would like to learn more about it.
Yeah, that one, let me go back to 61 for a second, and then I did actually read up a little bit on 51 because I didn't understand some of the opposition I was hearing about it. Proposition 61, and this is one that I did some research on because the No on 61 is doing a lot of advertising. I don't watch much TV myself, but when I do turn it on, there's an ad for No on 61. It sets the point of 61 is to restrict the cost of prescription drugs purchased by California agencies, and this is mostly Medi-Cal and CalPERS, the state employee retirement system. It's not going to affect you and I buying a prescription drug, but things that the state is paying for, like through Medi-Cal. It restricts that to the prices that the Veterans Administration pays. And the logic of that is the Veterans Administration, because of its size, negotiates among the best prices going. And so apparently the argument of the No on 61 people are that, well, then the pharmaceutical industries will just raise the prices on the Veterans Administration. Well, the reason the Veterans Administration can negotiate a lower price is because they're negotiating with different companies that are supplying the same drug. So unless they act in collusion, which is illegal, they wouldn't go around just willy-nilly raising the price of one of their largest customers. So I don't think the main argument against 61 holds a lot of water. And in the meantime, it could save California a lot of money for money that we're putting out on prescription drugs. The Prop 51, I brought along a little here, if you don't mind my jumping over. I would recommend to all of you a website called ballotpedia.org. It has all the arguments on both sides, who's for and against, who's spending money for and against. Oops, now I lost it. But Prop 51 is a measure to it's a $9 million bond to 9 billion. What did I say? 9 million? Everybody knows 9 million is nothing anymore. $9 billion for upgrades and renovations and additional building for K-12 and community colleges. And if I could hit this properly. So the arguments for, they list, this is a long page. There's all these people, support. And this is one I didn't print out. Arguments against, where did it go? They say it takes too much control from local schools. You know how schools are all supposed to be local. And that's the main thing, is that it becomes a state measures and would override local school authority somehow or other. And they also say it would just benefit the contractors. But as far as I can tell, and I've been reading nothing but proposition endorsements for the past week, all the various progressive organizations that have taken a stand on this are in favor of Prop 51, the $9 billion bond to fix and upgrade schools. So, any other, okay? Up front again?
I thought it's probably worth saying something about 65 and 67.
Excellent.
The plastic bag ban.
Please do.
And what I understand about it is that 67 will continue the current plastic bag that's in place in the state. And I hope you'll correct me on this, but
No,
my
that's
understanding is that that 65 was introduced as kind of one of these confusing measures, which would, that assuming 67 passes and 65 passes, that it would increase the amount of money you have to pay for a plastic bag at the store. But maybe you can
yes.
correct me about that.
No,
and
that's
with that,
about
I
right.
think with the thought that that might discourage people from supporting 67 if they knew they were going to have to pay more for plastic bags.
Right.
That's but please help clarify if you can.
67, and this is one of the ones I did research. 67, the California legislature actually passed a bill several years ago, and it's been challenged, and 67 will uphold that, and it will basically put in place statewide a ban on retailers using plastic bags. Some of the arguments being made against it, Rose Aguilar on Your Call Radio and KALW had a really good program on it. I learned a lot. Some of the arguments against are that under the system, when you pay that 25 cents or whatever it is, I forget what it is, when you buy a 10 cents, that stays with the store. The Proposition 65, which is the fake bag one, says that money goes to recycling plastic bags. So, but right now, even with plastic, where plastic bags are still being used, only 3% of those bags actually get recycled. The rest end up in trash. So 67 is the real ban the plastic bag, and 65 is the fake one backed by plastic bag manufacturers.
Could I make a comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one that is dear to my own heart as well too. I come from Ireland, and in Ireland we had a nationwide ban on plastic bags many years ago, and it works fine. You know, I think this is the plastic industry needs to get over this, move on, and do the right thing. You know, we need plastic, but we don't need plastic bags. And I was listening to a program, I'm not sure which it was, where they were trying to suggest that this was about the big corporate grocery stores getting all this millions of dollars from these plastic or these bags that people go in and have to buy. Well, it is 10 cents. but it costs them 6 cents, so they're making 4%. But not everybody needs the bag, and they were suggesting that they are pushing these bans. Well, I was down and I worked with San Jose, and I was at the city council meeting when this ban in San Jose was initiated, and there wasn't one person from the corporate grocery stores there. There was the average citizen, the environmentalists, the people of faith that were coming out to get rid of plastic bags because it is creating a disaster environmentally for us. This is something that people should just go out and vote on 67.
67.
You know, this was something that should have been in place in 2014. The lobbyists and money is being poured in out of state. You talk about, you know, Citizen United, all these other corporate money is pouring in and giving this misinformation. And there is no accountability for it. So I really support it. I think that we can live with it and get on with it. And let's get with it, you know. As a country, we did it fine in Ireland. And
People are still shopping successfully in Ireland.
People are still shopping, spending money. You know, it's like you just grow. It's like cassette tapes. We don't have cassette tapes anymore. We move on. You know, and this is we need to move on and get on with life and get on to the bigger issues. You know?
Plastic bags are the 8 tracks of the 21st century. One quick question for Prop 59: how do we enforce it? How are we going to make sure our legislators follow
It is designed not to be enforceable. It is a non-binding proposition. It is designed to send a message. And the idea here is this is a political movement. It's called Move to Amend because it is a movement.
Ultimately, to amend the Constitution.
Amending the Constitution is not something that happens quickly and not without a lot of effort. But this is a step in the direction of turning the tide against the indifference and the acquiescence that we as a society have exhibited towards the takeover of our public dialogue by money and power. We need to, again, other voices, our voices need to be heard. The megaphone of the wealthy, the unaccountable corporations, those megaphones need to be, if not silenced, they need to be dampened. And the way you do that is through a movement. This initiative is an extremely important part of that movement. It is a mechanism whereby the voters of California...
I'm going to have to cut you off there because we've got 30 seconds left, and that's just enough time to say thank you to Eitan Fenson, Gerard McGuire, and Don Veith for coming and giving us these good presentations. Next month, November 1st, we're going to look at another angle on the elections. What happens in electronic voting machines? It's called Code Red and subtitled, I Voted, I think. So join us then on November 1st and be sure to get out and vote. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.